Welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we are moving on to the next episode of my category breakdown series, and in this video, we are taking a look at the best costume design. And if you're new to this series, basically all this is it's just a series where we take a look at every single category at the Oscars, and we take a look at all of the nominees. So we're going to discuss some facts about the people nominated in the category, just talk about their work in general, and then at the end I'm going to give my personal ranking and my prediction for how likely it is that I think they win the Oscar. And also, before we jump into this category, I do want to make a note here that from when I'm recording this and when I'm uploading this, last night was the PGA and the DGA Awards, where Anora came out victorious in both of those. I'm not necessarily going to do any sort of reaction to that. It is I guess this is the reaction. It's a big win, and it's completely shifted the way that I'm viewing Anora, and I think the way that a lot of people have viewed Anora, as we thought it was kind of one of the films that's in the mix. Now I think it's pretty clearly it's been shown to us that this is the front runner, and it's been the front runner. So just wanted to put that in here, just since this is the most recent video post that. I will talk more about kind of the PGA and the DGA when we get to like the picture and director category breakdown videos. But I guess those are just my thoughts for now, that it is just kind of this big shocker to me, especially DGA. I no shot that I think Sean Baker had at winning that. So really exciting, and it's kind of cool seeing within the span of about, what was it, like 30 hours between the Critics' Choice Awards and PGA DGA, that just completely shifted the way that we view this Oscar race. So I think it's just a real fun, exciting weekend that we had. And then without further ado, let's jump into the actual category here, Best Costume Design. The first nominee is a complete unknown. Costume designer Arianne Phillips. This is Arianne Phillips' fourth Oscar nomination, and she's still looking for her first win. She was nominated in James Mangold's other musician biopic in 2006 for Walk the Line, as well as in 2020 for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and in 2012 for W.E. A Complete Unknown was also nominated for Best Costume Design at the BAFTAs. Now, A Complete Unknown is one of the films that already was predicted, when we were doing our Oscar nomination predictions and stuff. It was one of those that was predicted to be like a top 5 film in terms of total nominations, and it got all of those, plus it got 2 additional nominations. So A Complete Unknown got, I think it's maybe third most. I don't have the exact number, but it's up there in terms of like the most nominations. Maybe it's not quite third, but it's really up there. And this is kind of crazy that this is the first category that we're getting a chance to talk about A Complete Unknown is in. Now, as far as the costume designs in A Complete Unknown, there are a lot of things that are really impressive. Now, A Complete Unknown, it does have the distinct thing here of being the only one that is based off of real people, based off of, I guess they're real people. Right? It does kind of have that distinction of being the only one that is taken place, with kind of within our lifetimes, right? Within the last 60, 70 years. So it is the one film in that case that there is this thing that you can look to, and we have these more accurate descriptions and representation of, like, this is what they were wearing, these are the references, here's the footage, or either footage or pictures, things that we have from this specific era that we can kind of look into and say, okay, this is what we're kind of basing the work off of. And so I think for that reason it is impressive. And usually in a lot of these categories, it's one thing that I'm noticing a lot this year in this Oscar race is, like, A Complete Unknown is almost not only one of our only musician biopics, but it's also just one of the very few that are like these based on true stories, and so the costume design has to be accurate to what the characters, what they were actually wearing, and we have this, again, these photographs and this proof and the kind of concepts that they can work off of to make sure that they're matching the costume designs. Usually there's a couple of those every year. This year, A Complete Unknown is kind of the only one that is kind of in that realm, and so I don't want it to make it seem like I'm kind of shorting the film in that sense of that I don't think it's as impressive because there was something that they were based off of, because obviously that is impressive, being able to copy the costumes and make sure that it is realistic and it's true to what you are depicting. But I do think that in a category like this where there's a lot of kind of fantasy and other films here where it's like you're having to come up with kind of either your own designs or some kind of like uniform design for a lot of your characters, I do think that this is kind of it's just not necessarily my favorite in the category. And I'll also say that for A Complete Unknown, we're going to talk about it a lot more moving forward because it has so many nominations. There's a lot of aspects I like about A Complete Unknown more than the costume design. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting A Complete Unknown in 5th, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 4th. The next nominee is Conclave. Costume designer Lissy Crystal. This is Lizzie Crystal's second Oscar nomination. She was also nominated in 2012 for Anonymous. Conclave was nominated for Best Costume Design at the BAFTAs and the Critics' Choice Awards. Now, Conclave is another one of these where, while the characters themselves aren't necessarily these real characters that they were basing off of, like, real people, but the profession and this kind of group of cardinals all coming together, that is a very real thing, and it is a something that they kind of had some kind of historical precedent to be able to copy those looks, to be able to just recreate the look of a cardinal. And I think kind of one of the impressive things here is bringing all of these cardinals to Vatican City, bringing them all together, bringing them all in this room. And I think it's impressive that you just have again this costume design. It's a fairly standard costume design for the cardinals and for the nuns here in Vatican City. But what is so impressive about it is the sheer volume, the sheer number of it. That it's not like the most impressive thing of like every single person, every single background character is in these different costumes. There is a kind of standard uniform costume that pretty much everyone is in this film, and I think that's one of those things that I think is impressive about this film is kind of the I guess I don't necessarily want to say repetition, but just kind of the standardization of making sure that every character looks the same, has the exact same uniform, is wearing it the right way, fitted all the way, the entire fit, right? It's just the entire kind of the gown. Make sure they've got the right hat. Make sure they've whether if it's got kind of the rosary or if they're wearing any other sort of additional accessories on top of the costume, making sure that it's all standard and making sure that it is accurate to how these cardinals and how these nuns, how they would be dressing. So I do think that there's a lot in that case that is impressive. And so Conclave is kind of this, for me in this category, as much as I love Conclave, and if you've noticed, it's been kind of pretty high up on a couple of my lists so far. In terms of this category, I do think that there is kind of the same thing as kind of a pro and a con in the sense that it's impressive, the sheer volume of what they're doing with the same costume over and over, but at the same time it is also kind of the same costume over and over. So it is kind of this interesting little balance in the middle there that I do think is, again, I can see kind of the pros and the cons to the argument, and so for me it's just, that's why it kind of just is kind of in the middle of the category for me. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Conclave in third, but for my prediction, I'm putting it in second. The next nominee is Gladiator II, costume designer Janty Yates and Dave Crossman. This is Janty Yates' third Oscar nomination, and all three of her nominations have come in collaboration with director Ridley Scott. She won in 2001 for the original Gladiator, and she was nominated last year for Napoleon. This is Dave Crossman's second Oscar nomination. He was also nominated last year for Napoleon. Gladiator II was also nominated for Best Costume Design at the Critics' Choice Awards. Gladiator II is kind of a fascinating study here in this category for, I think, multiple reasons. One, for it being the franchise, the previous, original Gladiator won this category back in 2001. And so I do think that there's kind of something interesting there of, like, it's a previous winner. Does it have what it takes to kind of double up on the award for the same franchise, where a lot of it is, I don't want to necessarily say it's all the same costumes, but it is kind of the same appeal. It's the same era, it's the same kind of general idea of the costumes, and so there is something to kind of be said there, something you can kind of debate and kind of discuss whether you think it has that opportunity to pull that off. But what I think is impressive about Gladiator 2's costumes, or the thing that really kind of stands out to me, is, again, it's the same as, like I was kind of talking about with A Complete Unknown. We can look at this era and we can look at this group, this time period, and say, okay, these are what the costumes are supposed to look like. So you're kind of getting these period accurate costumes and making sure that we're representing this time and this place the way that they are. But it's also, I think what's impressive about it is it's every single character is in some sort of costume. There are some films where you might look at A Complete Unknown, and obviously every character is always in a costume. That's the whole point of kind of the costume department. But there might be some characters that you're looking at it and it looks, to someone just watching the film, they might just think that that's just someone in regular clothes, right? It's just someone that's not necessarily in a specific costume that is either to that era or to a specific person that they're portraying. It just seems like that's just the clothes they're wearing. Gladiator 2 is very clear that every single person is in some sort of getup. They are in some sort of costume. And I think what's impressive, and the thing that I like or appreciate the most about the costume design in Gladiator 2, is the almost the story that the costumes tell, in a sense that it's not quite like Conclave, where everyone is in a costume, but it's all very repetitive and it's the same costume. Gladiator 2, the costumes are really telling the story. It's telling you're able to kind of identify who is who based off of how extravagant their clothing is. Is it all of the gladiators that are kind of just in their very I don't want to say like less covered, but I mean it's just the typical kind of gladiator outfit that is kind of a little bit more kind of just like padding or shielding or whatever, and then not a whole lot, and it's a lot more open for flexibility. Or are we looking at a Denzel Washington or Joseph Quinn or Fred Hinscher? Is that can't remember what his last name is, but when you're looking at the kind of the rich and the people that are out here buying the gladiators and buying these people to do their fight for their entertainment, where they're all dressed in these fancy dresses and these got all of the extra jewelry, and then obviously makeup isn't necessarily this category, but they've got all the makeup, and everything that they're wearing is kind of just telling you the different classes and the different groups that everyone belongs to. And then you're even able to see some of the people that are maybe not necessarily the low level of just a regular gladiator, but they're still not quite to the kings and to the top of the food chain, if you will. And so you're getting this cool story of everyone's costumes are very different, and even within the classes that they are, everyone has these unique kind of flares and different touches and splashes to their costumes that kind of separate them from everyone else. But it does a really cool job of just giving you so many different looks, and again, with every single character having some sort of specific and unique costume design to them. So I do think it is really impressive, just kind of the overall work, and kind of more so than I think some of the other maybe save for one that we're going to get to a little bit later. This is maybe the film here in this category where the costumes, I think, almost tell a story in and of itself more so than every other film, and so I do think that that's really impressive. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Gladiator 2 in 4th, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in 5th. The next nominee is Nosferatu. Costume designer Linda Muir. This is Linda Muir's first Oscar nomination. She's worked on all three of director Robert Eggers' previous films, 2022's The Northman, 2019's The Lighthouse, and 2015's The Witch. Nosferatu was nominated for Best Costume Design at the BAFTAs and the Critics' Choice Awards. And while it obviously doesn't take place as far back as Gladiator 2 does, Nosferatu is the other film that does take place pretty far back. It's the rest of the three are kind of a little more recent, and so this is another film that does kind of have the distinction and the unique aspect to it of the costume design has to represent this era. It has to represent kind of the country and the time in which it's taking place, and I think Nosferatu does an excellent job at that. Now, I don't think it's quite like what I was saying with Gladiator 2, where every single character has its own unique costumes that are kind of telling the story of like the class and like who's kind of the gladiators, who's the higher upper class and stuff like that. It's not quite doing that here in Gladiator, but it is still showing you a very clear, and at least for a couple of the families, you're kind of seeing Lily Rose Depp and Nicholas Hoult, that maybe there's their costume design, while still kind of fancy, it's clearly a little bit less extravagant, as opposed to like Emma Corrin and Aaron Taylor Johnson, their characters, their family, a little bit more fancy, have a fancier place, fancier house, so the clothes are a little bit naturally a little more fancy. And then you've got the costume design for just kind of all of the doctors, Willem Dafoe's characters and Ralph Ineson and everyone else that kind of comes in. Everyone has this own unique costume, this own unique look that it all works very well. And so it's not quite to the same level of Gladiator 2 in terms of telling its own story, but it is still really impressive for that reason, for so many different characters just kind of having so many different looks and kind of what those looks necessarily mean to them. Now, what Nosferatu does have is it does have the Count Orlok factor of it all. It does have while you have these humans and these regular characters in these particular clothes that kind of do make sense and are true to the who would be living in this time at this place in time, you also have a monster on top of it that gets to have, because it's easy to just say like, okay, this monster, this Nosferatu, should still be wearing essentially what the people of this time would be wearing, but you get a little bit more of a freedom, because you're not just necessarily trying to be 100% accurate of like, this is what they would dress like, because there is no precedent to what this monster would be wearing. So you kind of get this fun freedom. You get this extra thing that you get to create an iconic look, and you get to create just this character design. Now, granted, obviously, Nosferatu, this isn't an original film. It is based off of, previous work. And so it's one of those things that, there is something that you're basing it off of, but you're basing it off of that and then still having to realize it and still having to bring it into your film. And I think they do an excellent job with that character design here. And so Nosferatu, I think it kind of gets the double points here of you created an iconic character, you have dressed and dressed up an iconic character with this iconic look that's something that stands out in terms of the overall costume design. But then you also kind of nailed all of our regular characters, our humans. You've created looks for them that are accurate to the time and are very impressive and extravagant as well. I mean, it is even with kind of the, like I was talking about with Lily Rose Depp and Nicholas Hoult as kind of the poorer characters of like kind of the main group. It still is this fancy and an impressive just costume design where it's a lot, especially with Lily Rose Depp, where there's a couple scenes where she's wearing these fancier kind of these bigger dresses. And then you've got all of the men kind of typically kind of in their suits, or when they're kind of a little bit more stripped down, but still kind of have the slacks or just the nicer look to them, kind of a little bit more of a professional kind of a look, I guess. And so it's just one of those things where all of the human characters all are dressed, look very well, and then you've got such an iconic character design on top of it through the costume work. I think that's what makes Nosferatu just really impressive and stand out to me. So for my personal ranking, I'm putting Nosferatu in second, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in third. And the final nominee is Wicked. Costume designer Paul Tazewell. This is Paul Tazewell's second Oscar nomination. He was also nominated in 2022 for West Side Story. Wicked won for Best Costume Design 2 days ago at the Critics' Choice Award and is nominated at the BAFTAs. Now, I kind of mentioned at the end of my Gladiator section where I said that there was only one other film that the costume design for the characters told the story a little bit more than Gladiator did, and of course it's Wicked. It's one of those Wicked as a property, just as a play, is something that the costume designs and the makeup and things like that. Those are the aspects that are just so like iconic about the film. Anytime you kind of have someone that's like wearing all black or someone wearing all pink, like it just kind of creates that vision of Wicked. Or I guess would also kind of work with the color green as well as the color pink, kind of mashing those together. It just kind of creates this the imagery. It's kind of the association. You're going to associate that with Wicked. So I think it has just such an iconic step up, like kind of a leg advantage in this category than a lot of other films did, because it is kind of established already that the costumes are one of the most iconic, I think, parts of the property that already existed. But then to realize that and to come in and create a film that again works very well and the costumes do not let you down, I think is what's also very impressive here. So again, when we're talking about the costume design for Wicked, obviously you're mostly going to be talking about Glinda and you're going to be talking about Elphaba as our main characters, because one of the things that is kind of was one of the things that was kind of being talked about a lot amongst people when Wicked was first coming out, amongst people that hadn't seen the play, is a lot of people wondering, why is everyone in the school in these school uniforms except these two? Why are Glinda and Elphaba, why are these the two characters that are in this like uniform, the uniform of the school? And so I do think that is something that is also impressive, because you're able to kind of have this uniform look for all of our students, or all of kind of a lot of these background characters. But then the main players, the biggest main characters, they all get their own individual unique costume looks that make them stand out and make them pop out amongst kind of just the entirety of the ensemble. And so I think that is something that is very well done, and it's also very attention to detail done to kind of make the characters obviously kind of just stand out and seem more iconic and create these iconic looks. But as far as just Wicked goes, it's not just the students. You've got Miss Morrible for Michelle Yeoh. You've got the Wizard and Jeff Goldblum. You've got you've got Elphaba's parents, and you've got other just kind of, I guess, the rest of the teachers and just kind of the adult characters, or the advisors, or just, I don't know exactly what the proper word for kind of just the other teachers or whatever that are on campus. You get all of these different costume designs for all of them that are unique and are different. And it's just one of these things where you get a film where you just have such a large ensemble, and every single person is costume is either telling the story of where you have the class where they're all kind of uniform and they're in this iconic, just similar look, and then you have the important kind of other characters. You have your main characters that they wear these more extravagant things, or this, for Galinda's case, a rotating trove of just different pink dresses and attire. And then you've got Elphaba, who's just kind of a little bit more the more reserved, the more blacks. And then obviously once you get the iconic witch's hat that comes a little bit later in the film, there's just so many different pieces of that I think just create, I guess, not necessarily create, because again, it's already kind of established that these are characters that have existed in media before, but it just kind of confirms that previous work, and they come in and they complete the look, and they do it the same way that it was supposed to be done. It's just a very iconic, just beautiful looks, and just the sheer volume of so many different characters, so many different background characters, and every single person's costume is so full of attention to detail, and so full of, I guess, just kind of heart and love, and the passion that was put into kind of the crafts of this film is what really makes it stand out. And for me, I just think this is one of the categories, I think, at the Oscars that is feeling a little bit locked already. Like, this is one of those that I would just be stunned to see anything, not only catch up to where Wicked kind of currently already is in the race, as well as, let alone just passing it. And so for my personal ranking, I'm putting Wicked in first, and for my prediction, I'm putting it in first. And that's it. Thank you so much for watching this video. Let me know down below in the comments what you think of the nominees here in this category. Let me know if there was any films that you think were snubbed in this category. What would you have liked to have seen get in here? Also, just let me know down below in the comments what category you're excited to see next, because we're getting pretty close here. We're only a couple weeks away, so we're going to start keeping this ball rolling, and hopefully every single day have a new video for you, new category breakdowns. So just let me know what you're looking forward to next. And if you'd like to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of those videos, I would greatly appreciate it. Have a great day.